Welcome to the Cloud Pod, where the forecast is always cloudy. We talk weekly about all things AWS, GCP, and Azure. We are your hosts,
Justin,
Jonathan,
Ryan,
and Peter.
Episode 156, recorded on March 9th, 2022. The Cloud Pod takes back everything it said about Windows versus Linux security. Good evening, Jonathan, Ryan, and Peter.
Hey there.
hello.
Hey.
It's been an interesting week once again here in the cloud. Lots of stuff going on and security things and lots to talk about tonight, unfortunately. So let's get right to it. With first up, Knative is now officially a CNCF incubation project. CNCF CTO Chris Aniszczyk said, Native is a powerful technology that is well integrated with the cloud native ecosystem, making it easier to run serverless containers on Kubernetes. We think the project will benefit greatly from an open governance model under the foundation, allowing it to grow even more by reaching new contributors and end users. We look forward to working with the Knative community and welcome the team's contributions. Knative has continued to see rapid development even since they've been submitted to the CNCF, hitting version 1.0 in November. And Google also said that they will be passing the trademark over to the CNCF as well. So Google will not retain anything of Knative other than their contributions in code and developers.
And that was the stink earlier, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. That was a big blocker. I mean, this is going to give a lot of people who want to build upon Knative the security of it not being killed by Google. So I'm happy to see this being in a vendor agnostic sort of governance model. So that's great.
I mean, so I was thinking about Knative the other day, and it had a really big buzz. Like when we were talking about this before, when all this hubbub came out, it was one of the darlings of Kubernetes, and everyone was talking about it, and then it kind of has died off. And is that a reflection of of this issue, or is it just that we've kind of moved on as a technology industry? I'm not entirely sure why I haven't heard as much about Knative as I had been for a while. Maybe because I just put it in the show notes. But overall, I don't quite understand what's happened there. I'm not following along 100% of what's happened in the market.
I would imagine it had at least some effect. I mean, people are attracted to these technologies, are attracted to them because they want a vendor agnostic solution. And suddenly there's a piece that may not be completely agnostic. And it's like, man, let's hold off. And you leave a door open for competing technologies.
And is there a competitor to Knative that everyone's raving about these days? Like, I get what you're saying. I don't know that exists. That's where I'm a little bit lost.
Well, the rapid development is sort of indicative of its use, right? Because that takes a very active community, not only the people fixing it, but the people sort of using it and working with the teams to sort of, surface rough edges and make recommendations. But, I don't use it firsthand, so I don't know.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting. I still, if you're getting into serverless and functions like that, and you can deal with what the cloud providers are providing you, it is a bit nice to just focus on that outcome of going to serverless versus how you worry about the technology. Do you run it on Knative, or do you run it on functions, or do you run it on Lambda? I think there's a lot of confusion in that market maybe right now as well.
Yeah.
Well, Linux has been apparently bitten by a pretty bad security issue. So, if you were just getting over that Log4j hangover and you were saying, I really feel bored at work, this one might impact you. I don't know. This is the new vulnerability called Dirty Pipes. It was announced on Monday here, a couple days before our recording on the 7th of March. And this is tracked as CVE-2022-0847. The vulnerability came to light when a researcher for a website building company called CM4All was troubleshooting a series of corrupted files that kept appearing on their customer's Linux machine. And after a few months, they figured out that it was due to the bug in the Linux kernel itself. To weaponize the vulnerability to allow anyone with an account, including the least privileged nobody account, to add an SSH key to the root user's account. With that, the untrusted user could remotely access the server with an SSH window that has full root privileges. And there's a quote here from Brad Spangler, president of Open Source Security. It's about as severe as it gets for the local kernel vulnerability. Just like Dirty Cow, there's essentially no way to mitigate it and involves core Linux kernel functionality. Apparently, to exploit this, the researcher said that you'll need to create a pipe, fill the pipe with some type of arbitrary data to set the pipe buff flag can merge flag in all ring entries. Drain that pipe, leaving the flag set in the alt struct pipe buffer instance, and splice the data from the target file into the pipe from just before the target offset, and wire the arbitrary data into the pipe. This data will then overwrite the cache file page instead of creating a new anonymous struct pipe buffer. because the pipe buff flag can merge is set. And so while dirty pipe is powerful, I don't understand anything I just said to you. And there are key requirements for it to work, and limitations do exist for this. So first of all, you must have read permissions of the file system in some way. You must also have the ability to SSH to it or get access to the box or console or some other way to actually exploit this, as well as many other things in place. One caveat on this, when your security team comes screaming at you like, hey, I'm going to patch all of our Linux boxes, that's only if you're on kernel version 5.8 or newer, as this is limited to those. And as we did just a little bit of research here before the show, like many of the favorite kernels of your enterprise products are not up to 5.8 yet anyway. So you may not be exploited yet or exploitable, but unless you're using Slackware for production, and then pity on your souls.
Yeah.
I think creating SSH keys is probably not even the worst sort of effect that the vulnerability could have. I mean, so you don't have any inbound SSH access, then that doesn't help you SSH in. But if you have this vector for attack, you can overwrite the contents of any file, including files that have, executable files that have the set UID bit, which means you can arbitrarily run anything as root and start shipping data out. And probably egressing data is much more easy than getting data in to a lot of systems in the cloud. So
it's definitely dangerous, but I do sort of like the comparisons to like Dirty Cow and those types of things. Like Dirty Cow was so impactful because it had been around for 10 years. This hasn't been around all that long. It's only in a few kernel releases. Maybe it's wishful thinking on my part because I am sort of vulnerability'd out. But I don't know if this is the same risk level as either, anything we've dealt with recently.
Makes me glad I'm not working for a previous employer, because the system I used to run allowed customers to upload arbitrary scripts for data processing, and they could very easily have just compromised the entire SaaS operation.
Yeah.
It's not good. Definitely things not to do if you can help it. All right. Well, Amazon is here with a few announcements this week. So if you're an RDS customer using MySQL or Postgres, you might have ran into a conundrum in the console. And that is that you maybe potentially need a multi-AZ deployment to have redundancy and availability, but you also needed read-only nodes. And so you had to make a trade-off between those two choices. You couldn't get both. Until now, RDS is now allowing you to get a new offering that allows you to combine the automatic failover and read replicas with two readable standby instances, and is available for both the MySQL and the Postgres database. And you might say, what are the benefits of having two read nodes and a write node? Well, write operations are now faster when using a multi-AZ DB cluster, because you potentially are offloading all of your read operations to those read-only clusters, read-only nodes, allowing write operations to go through unblocked. And then your failover operations are typically faster than a multi-AZ DB instance, with two standby instances available as hot standby and leveraging the local storage for transaction log optimization replication. This makes it much, much faster to then replicate. If you're excited about this, you can get this started with 52 cents an hour for the M6 GD instances on the multi-AZ read-only replica setup. So pretty nice. I don't know that I realized that this was one of those catch-22s. You couldn't have both, but it makes sense that you couldn't in how it was architected originally.
I knew that you couldn't use the standby as a read-only instance, but I didn't know you couldn't add a read-only instance as well.
Apparently not.
Because it's one of those things you hit, and then you're like, oh, and you're like, all right.
Yeah,
at that point, you probably move to like a Memcached or an Elasticache if you need read-only in front of your database. So you probably just mitigated it in your architecture differently. That's all.
We should have a whole section in the podcast from the department of things we thought we already had.
Yep. There's definitely some of those.
Oh yeah,
and I kind of add that the reading from the read replicas is okay, but only if you can tolerate inconsistent reads. So that doesn't work for everybody.
No, it does not.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I see a blog post from 2018 that says that you could do it. Read replicas on multi-AZ deployments. Wonder.
Real-time follow from Peter.
Yeah. Sorry.
No worries.
Because it's like, I think I've done this before. This is weird. I'm like, yeah, it looks like I had done it before. But you could never use the you could never use, I don't know if now you can use the read, the actual second, the failover instance as your read
Yes.
replica.
I think that's the
save
change.
That's the
is
change.
that it's
Yeah.
the hot stand. The read
Right.
is now a hot standby.
Yeah.
Right. So now you're saving a bunch of money, right? Because before you just that instance, that cost was just complete sunk cost for availability.
Yeah, at that point, you may as well just have done regular backups and just restored it and tolerated the extra 30 minutes downtime.
Right.
Totally.
And Postgres wasn't in that original one, so they've also added Postgres.
Yeah, I do remember the first version of Multi-AZ was only MySQL. So I don't actually remember when they added Postgres to that, but I knew it happened a while ago. I just don't recall.
I remember using that Bucardo for that
Oh, God.
for many years.
Jeez.
Where's my shot glass? That was the thing that replicate data, but not the schemas. So if you need to do a schema update, you'd have to do the schema update everywhere separately. And then,
Yeah,
oh, God.
of course.
Again, where's the shot glass?
Whoa. I'm glad I have no firsthand experience with what you guys are talking about. That sounds awful.
Yes. Data only.
There's all kinds of really nasty database technologies that live out there in this world that you don't know anything about that you're better off for.
Yeah.
That's anytime you start talking about, well, it's not Semantic anymore. I think it's now Veritas storage layer for Oracle database. All kinds of bad. Well, if you are dealing with third-party risk and you are standardizing on some of the open standards for third-party risk through CyberGRX, AWS is now announcing the availability of AWS CyberGRX reports for their customers. With the increase in adoption of cloud platforms and services across multiple sectors and industries, AWS has become one of the most critical third-party ecosystems, and customers are using third-party risk platforms such as CyberGRX to better manage risks from their evolving third-party ecosystem and drive operational efficiencies. To help help Amazon's customers in such efforts, they have completed a CyberGRX assessment of its security posture. An assessment is performed annually and is validated by the independent CyberGRX partners. CyberGRX assessment applies a dynamic approach to third-party risk assessment, which is updated in line with changes in risk level of cloud service providers or as AWS updates its security posture and controls. So basically, to summarize this down, this is a continually evolving SOC 1, SOC 2 type setup tied to a ever-changing threat landscape of this cloud and world that we're living in, and basically allows them to keep a much more updated set of things, as well as third-party companies can now register themselves into CyberGRX, and then that data gets shared with their customers. So each customer doesn't have to reinvent the entire assessment process for their company. They can just rely on this centralized third-party process.
Yeah, but who tells me I should trust CyberGRX?
Well, you should have third-party risk assessed CyberGRX first to see if you trust them, and then you can then trust them. That's how that works. Amazon is excited to announce that DevOps Guru now features an integration with Amazon Code Guru Profiler, and this integration allows you to access recommendations from Amazon Code Guru Profiler as insights in the DevOps Guru console, making it easier to connect application performance issues with the underlying code responsible for that slow performance. It's always Ryan's. It's fine. Previous customers using both services had to separate review insights and recommendations across both services and independently make correlations on their own. Now they'll do that for you as long as you are using both services to get this data. So there you go. Automatic correlations, ML at work, making my life easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm hoping the setup of this is really easy and straightforward, because it's the having two disparate systems and sort of correlating across always sucks. But then, I can see lots of difficulties in keeping, a code base and the profile that's, detecting that against the version of code that's running in Lambda. And maintaining that is also being very difficult. And so very curious to try this out and see, how bad my code is. We already know not great, right? But if it could be specific on how not great it is, awesome.
At least it's not no code.
It's bespoke code only.
Do you think they'll announce no integration for no code?
Where were you when we were talking about show titles? Come on, man.
Yeah.
All right. The AWS JDBC driver for MySQL is now generally available for use with RDS or Aurora MySQL compatible DB clusters. And this database driver minimizes failover time by monitoring database cluster status and caching the cluster's topology. The cache is then used to improve DNS and resolution speed if nodes fail, reducing failover time from minutes to seconds. This is a drop-in for the existing community MySQL driver, and should be much very easy for you to switch to right away. I was a little bit curious, so I went on a mission to go find out how this actually worked. And so I was able to find more detailed documentation in the Amazon documentation quagmire. And it basically said, before a replica instance can be elevated to the role of a primary DB instance, the DNS record must be updated in order to properly direct the connection. Duh. This process can take up to several minutes. The AWS JDBC driver for MySQL is designed to coordinate with this behavior in order to provide minimal downtime. And it achieves this by maintaining a cache of the MySQL cluster topology and each instance's role. This topology is provided via direct query to the MySQL database, providing a shortcut to bypass the delays caused by DNS resolution. With this knowledge, the AWS JDBC driver for MySQL can more closely monitor the database cluster status so that a connection to the new primary DB instance can be established as quickly as possible. So quite interesting how they actually made that happen. This is open source as well. So if you're another cloud provider and you like to steal this, you can do so because it's all open source. So there you go.
In a way, this is it's a very cloudy problem that thankfully has been solved now. Because in your own data center, you could use virtual IPs, and you'd float the virtual IPs between the different masters, and you wouldn't need a DNS change. We only need a DNS change in the cloud because the use case for this type of failure is we've lost an AZ, and now you simply can't move a VIP between different AZs because now they're in the different subnets and routing's all wrong. So it's awesome that they fixed this. It's been a problem in general for all databases, including MongoDB, so yeah, I mean, getting a software fix of this is really nice, and in a way, it's sort of breaking down the barriers a little bit between the client server and the us versus them of engineering versus operations, or engineering versus the database team that runs these services, and sort of making them all a little bit more aware of each other and their health. So I'm really excited. As excited as you can be about a JDBC driver, anyway.
A JDBC driver. Calm down there, man. Calm down.
Well, I mean, this has torpedoed several demos of resiliency for cloud migrations or DR tests. And, there's just relying on DNS when it works most of the time, great. But when it doesn't, because of, local client caching or, any kind of not redundancy, sorry. Propagation delays, it can get really problematic. And so I'm happy to see this. I think it's a huge advantage. It probably will be silently sort of celebrated because it is sort of.
And Java apps are notoriously bad at not honoring DNS TTLs anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Fine, we'll fix it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Wait 48 hours.
Can't fail over. We just have to change the code.
It's a Thanos thing. I'll do it myself. It's fine. All right. Well, Google got the wallet out this week. The wallet that had $5.4 billion of money to acquire Mandiant, or FireEye, as many people know them as well. The move comes exactly a month after reports emerged that Microsoft apparently was in early discussions to buy Mandiant as well. Mandiant will become part of the Google Cloud, where it will offer advisory services to help companies reduce risk before, during, and after security incidents, power additional threat detection, intelligence, and automated incident response tools, and more. Google Cloud CEO Thomas Kurian said in a press release, organizations around the world are facing unprecedented cybersecurity challenges as the sophistication and severity of attacks that were previously used to target major governments are now being used to target companies in every industry. We look forward to welcoming Mandiant to Google Cloud to further enhance our security operations suite and advisory services and help customers address their most important security challenges in their org. It's a pretty huge investment, a nice power play, and a shot across the bow, really, at Microsoft. I saw a lot of think pieces about this, about how much better off Mandiant is being bought by Google versus Microsoft, how much this is a big impact to industry and enterprise altogether. And at the end of the day, the thing I kept coming back to is AWS missing out here? Because their strategy of security through partners versus native to the cloud, I think, is a big miss in their strategy. But what do you guys think?
I think Mandiant's biggest customer is going to be GCP themselves. It's great that they'll offer services to Google customers, but just think of the value they'll have in securing their own cloud, especially given Azure vulnerabilities and AWS vulnerabilities that we've heard about over the past few months.
It's not it's not if, it's when.
Mm-hmm. But is Mandiant now going to be suddenly finding the vulnerabilities and publishing the vulnerabilities that they're finding in Azure and AWS and happen to maybe not mention the ones externally that are happening in GCP? Like they're no longer a a third party, independent third party.
I don't know, were they ever an independent third party? I mean, you pay them to do analysis and postmortems and things. I don't know. Did they actively go out and do research? And make
Mandiant?
publications? Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Mandiant's
Okay.
one of the biggest
That's what
thought
they
leaders
did.
out there. That's their space. They were the ones who detected the SolarWinds breach. Because they lost a bunch of tools based on keys getting lost at SolarWinds that then allowed people to get into their pipelines.
Is detected the right word, or first victim?
I mean, they had to know they were a victim somehow, right? So they figured it out.
All right, I take back the show title. Google pays $5.4 billion in hush money to Mandiant.
But I mean, like the founder of Mandiant is really well known in the cybersecurity space. So they've been around for a long time. They've been well known as Kevin Mandia is his name. He's been well known in the market for a long time as one of the leading experts in cybersecurity. So this is from an arms race perspective, there's no one else you could have bought that would have been a bigger impact to your credibility on the security side than this purchase by Google.
I'm just trying to figure out how this sort of gets incorporated into the Google Cloud offering. Like, I get security incident response, and we know there's SIM software and different things that I think are provided by Mandiant, but as part of the cloud, a large part of the prospect of running a workload on the cloud is that this is sort of abstracted away from you in a lot of ways.
I mean,
where it needs to be anyway.
I mean, you're getting a lot of things, right? You're getting their expertise, which is tremendously valuable in how you're designing and building your software from a security first perspective. So you're getting that, which is good. They also have a very big threat intelligence engine as well. So they can enhance their, all of their security tools that use threat intelligence feeds by now subscribing to the Mandiant feeds, which are some of the best in the world. So you're just getting a bunch of benefits from both of those. And then, the Thousand Eyes is probably not that great for them. They probably don't care that much about most of those products. There's a couple interesting like global health things FireEye is one thing of, not Thousand Eyes. Wait a minute. Too many eyes and technology people, too many eyes. So there are a bunch of things that FireEye was doing for them as well. Regarding threat intelligence and SDR and SOAR type of capabilities that are now available to them as well. So lots of interesting things there. But they did split out some of the FireEye stuff too, I think. So I don't know how much is left of the original FireEye versus Mandiant and what Mandiant's doing versus them at this point. All right, moving to OpenTelemetry. If you're using Cloud Spanner, you can now launch the OpenTelemetry receiver for Cloud Spanner, which provides an easy way for you to process and visualize metrics from Cloud Spanner system tables and export these to your APM tool of choice. Google has provided a reference and integration with Prometheus and sample Grafana dashboards that customers can use to template their own needs. This OpenTelemetry thing is interesting to me because it's sort of like all these proprietary vendors are now supporting OpenTelemetry, and they're all trying to now steal each other's customers because they all support OpenTelemetry. Like having a commodity standard, is that helping them or is that hindering them long term? What do you think?
Well, I find it really interesting that this is the ability to export metrics from Cloud Spanner. Because that's the difference. The other offerings from what I know, is that they can ingest OpenTelemetry metrics into their own systems. And so this is really there's no way without querying the CloudWatch API in Amazon, for instance, and then doing the conversion to OpenTelemetry to get your data out of CloudWatch once it's in there. And so this is sort of a native way to, if you have a team or you have, a whole setup based around Prometheus or Grafana, and you want to use the native technologies within Google Cloud, you can just continue using the technology you're comfortable with, and you don't have to, I'm sure, for Google, they enjoy that you're paying for it. But yeah, it's that's the big difference, I think, in this announcement than what I've seen with the other OpenTelemetry announcements.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the whole stack, like a whole legitimate observability stack built around OpenTelemetry and Prometheus and maybe Grafana and Cortex or something, it's obviously not good news if that becomes as easy as using Datadog or Logic Monitor or whatever. the other tools are. But from a standpoint of Cloud Spanner, it's like, yeah, they want everybody to use Cloud Spanner, which means everybody who is, needs to do observability with OpenTelemetry.
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing with OpenTelemetry is that no one wants to re-instrument their code when they change a vendor, right? So if you're, contract negotiations and feature parity and all kinds of things can influence basically your technology of choice for how you consume and manage this data. If contracts negotiations go south and you have to then go redo all your instrumentation, like, ugh, what a nightmare.
That's true.
Hey everyone, Jonathan here. I just wanted to take a minute to thank the cloud consulting gurus at Foghorn for helping make the Cloud Pod possible. These folks truly get it. Cloud consulting experts since 2008, they are premier tier partners with AWS, Google Cloud Platform Silver, and Microsoft Azure partners. From multi-cloud to containers to moving full production workloads to the cloud under the tightest compliance, Foghorn's team of full-stack cloud engineers have been there, done that, gotten the t-shirt, and are ready to share their experience with you. If you're in the market for some talent to supplement your team, visit www.fogops.io/thecloudpod. www.fogops.io/thecloudpod. Foghorn, the promise of cloud delivered.
All right. Well, Mandiant got acquired, and they mentioned Microsoft. And Microsoft apparently was rumors to buy them. And this reminded me of an article that I had saved for us that I had forgotten about, which was from Wall Street Journal about Microsoft's new security chief says it's time to take shelter in the cloud. And so his message basically is for companies and institutions suffering from major cyber attacks to take shelter in the cloud, particularly the Azure cloud. And he says in his first interview since taking the job, it's sort of like the mother of all problems. If you don't solve it, all the other technology stuff just doesn't happen in your business. This is all tied to Charlie Bell coming in, taking over the security side of Azure. I think we talked about this briefly on the show in the past. Apparently, he's been consolidating all of their security efforts into one massive organization with about 10,000 people, all reporting up to Charlie at the end of the day. And so they're really trying to, bring synergy across their security portfolio of products, which I think is needed because they are a little bit all over the place. Different UIs, different methodologies, different APIs. So by being able to really productize this thing with security for Azure and Microsoft, that's a huge value prop for Microsoft from a growth perspective, especially when it's $15 billion in revenue. So it makes sense to me when you look in light of what Azure is doing again. And I kind of go back to the question I just asked you guys about Mandiant. Is Amazon missing out here? They lost Charlie Bell, who they used to employ. Again, they leverage a very heavy partner ecosystem. These partners are being bought by either Microsoft or GCP or Palo Alto or Cisco. And at some day, what's Amazon's real strategy going to be in security? I ask that question again.
I don't have an answer to that question, but if Charlie Bell left because we suspect he was passed over for the CEO role, then how instrumental is he, or was he going to be, in a continued basis for security at AWS anyway?
Well, he was in the EC2 org, right?
He was the incident guy. He basically the one who was holding the leash of all availability at AWS and doing all the operation reviews and really diving into the metrics. And that was his role. That was, his operations meeting is famous in the Amazon circles because you could get called out at any time by any person to come up and present your metrics, and you had to be ready. And they would deep dive into your metrics in this operational review. So it's been well known for a long time. So he wasn't a natural replacement for Andy in my mind, just because he's an ops guy. At the end of the day, it sounded like, at least to me. But in this new role he's got, he's going to hyper focus on security, and security is hard too. So if he can solve this problem, it's going to be really great for him career wise, and great for Microsoft potentially at the end of the day.
Maybe cash a big paycheck too.
Yeah. Maybe Amazon don't feel that they need to buy somebody like Mandiant.
Well, I mean, they were talking about it, but yeah.
I mean, they build integration points, right? They build stuff like, GuardDuty, they build Detective, and they build, even the WAF, allows that integration. So they're building the underlying platform rather than sort of trying to provide a sort of kit and caboodle solution for these things. And I think that's going to make it very flexible and ability to pivot and, swap out providers if needed. I'm still, like with Google buying Mandiant, I'm really curious on how they want to incorporate that, right? Like it's clearly a good resource, but how they implement it's going to be a whole different thing.
Yeah, I guess how it integrates with the platform. It's great having a service like GuardDuty, but it's something you have to explicitly go and turn on and use and know how to use.
Well, that's better than them turning it on, which we've talked about in previous episodes. So, but yeah, I think Azure, they're still figuring themselves out, right? They've got a big security problem. They know that they're reorganizing the business to address it.
So Charlie's been there a little while, and apparently we have our first Azure attack vulnerability on his watch, reported allegedly to Microsoft on December 6th and fixed by December 10th by Microsoft Azure. Orca has come back to the fold with a new vulnerability they're calling AutoWarp. AutoWarp would have allowed managed identity tokens to be exploited to access other tenants, and Microsoft says that they detected no usage of the tokens and has notified all customers impacted. According to Yoav Olin, the CTO of cloud security at Orca, you could have very easily gotten a lot of access to a lot of customers. And this is because this vulnerability was in the Cloud Automation Suite, which is basically, or Azure Automation Suite, which is basically how you do CloudFormation in the Azure space. And this vulnerability allowed you to basically escalate your permissions and leverage that to then access other people's data in potentially the Azure cloud. So again, Microsoft said it was not exploited. They have no evidence of that exploitation. But they did notify any customers that were potentially impacted by the vulnerability. And they then said they had no further comment to Orca Security. So there you go. It's a big deal. And a lot of customers on the Microsoft side use this particular product. So this is a great find by Orca. Glad to see it. But, come on, Azure. You got to get better.
I mean, this sounds very similar to the vulnerability they found in CloudFormation and AWS as well, right? Like being able to sort of gain access to underlying system resources and exploit them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it worked on one cloud. Why wouldn't it work on the other cloud that hired
exactly.
we stole those engineers from to go build our cloud?
Yeah,
it definitely seems like they're targeting those systems which are multi-tenant in nature.
Yeah, I mean, that's escaping multi-tenant systems is a very well-known exploit vector for many SaaS companies because it's hard. And how do you protect memory? And that's why all this trusted compute is actually really interesting from those use case perspective, because now you're putting customer data into trusted complete compute enclaves to make sure they're protected. There's lots of opportunity there to make your world more secure and be able to still do multi-tenant, which is a great thing for cost. That isn't always factored in when you're talking about single tenant solutions.
Yeah. And, the Nitro stuff is all about isolation as well, right? It provides access, other ways. But I think the genesis of that idea was that isolation between those user workloads.
That and the service roles that you have to deploy. If you want a multi-tenant service to have access to your account to do work on your behalf, now we have to create this service role to allow them access. And I suppose that in a way is a mitigation, because if only 10% of customers deploy that role, then the potentially affected user base, if there is a vulnerability found, is now significantly smaller than it would have been if those customers didn't have those roles in place. It's a chore, but
I mean, we could do a whole nother episode about like how I think that introduces a ton of other problems, but it is true. It is at least choosing to give them access, which is a model I do like.
Well, it's least privilege, right? Because otherwise you're giving them inherent access, which is typically where problems arise. In a story that I really don't understand, because I don't understand Purview, Azure is announcing the preview release of dynamic lineage extraction from Azure SQL databases in Azure Purview. Azure SQL Database is one of the most widely used relational database systems in enterprises, and stored procedures are commonly used to perform data transformation and aggregation on SQL tables for downstream applications. With this release, the Azure Purview data map can be further enriched with dynamic lineage metadata such as run status, impacted number of rows, the client from which the stored procedure is run, user info, and other operational details from actual runs of SQL stored procedures in Azure SQL Database. And why you need all of that, I could not decipher from this article. And so that's where I'm at with this story. It sounds cool. I like the idea. I don't know what I do with it, but there you go.
It sounds like it has to do with 23andMe to me.
I'm lost on this as well. Like, what lineage of what the stored procedures in your SQL database, or like,
well, the number of, like, who's running your stored procedure, and then what their runtime of that stored procedure. Like, that's good metadata around these things as well. But like, why does Purview special in this model? Like, it's a weird.
Or is Purview just enabler? I don't know.
Yeah, and that's what's unclear about. And even watching the video did not help me either. So, this press release is a fail. Azure. Like, if I had to go Google for other stuff to figure out what the hell you're doing, I don't like it. So
it's important.
Maybe if we search on Bing.
No, don't search on Bing. Search on the Google Cloud Docs, because they've had features like this for a while, and it really comes down to auditability of where data is coming from when you generate let's say reports their data. So you need to make sure that you're not getting source data from places that you weren't allowed to. If a particular set of data is restricted for a particular use case, the lineage analysis will tell you where the data came from, which was aggregated to generate the output. And so it sort of gives you a summary of which tables, which processes, which procedures ran, like how was the data transformed. It's almost like a sort of a custody of data from source to output, so you can analyze whether your access policies are sufficient to control the use of data which may be restricted. And it's pretty useful.
Yeah, no, bless you, Jonathan, because this is data metadata. Yeah. Now I understand what it is. Thank you. Yeah.
That's why we're a team, also, folks.
There's no I in team.
Yeah.
And the other thing, of course, is if you have a poorly performing system, which I think is probably why they care for SQL Server. It will tell you this particular server or this particular data source isn't performing as well as perhaps the others, and it will help you kind of root out those problems. It's very much a GDPR thing.
Got it. That makes a lot more sense to me. And now that I remember that Purview is related to data access, it sort of makes sense to me. Like, it all clicks together. It's one cohesive vision. Like, okay, I got it.
If you work in the Microsoft Azure PR department, Jonathan accepts consulting requests at jonathan@thecloudpod.net.
Mm-hmm. He does. All right. Well, I have an Oracle story that is sort of not very helpful. So the headline of the story is Top Reasons Why a Multi-Cloud Improves Performance. And, I was kind of going through this and trying to understand what their argument was. And they have very little data of supporting this argument of their headline. But they basically say 76% of companies are adopting multi-cloud and hybrid deployment approaches. And multi-cloud can refer to any deployment of multiple software or platform as a service cloud offerings. They usually describes a mix of public infrastructure as a service and on-prem. According to Omdia, 52% of cloud adopters were affected by an inability to move workloads between clouds, and partnering with cloud providers that support an open cloud approach can help your organization move more quickly, adopt, and realize the benefits of multi-cloud in your strategy. And then they tell you what the difference between hybrid and multi-cloud is. No one cares. We all know that. And then there's a video that shows you multi-cloud and CRAN. So if you needed to explain multi-cloud to somebody, this video is actually helpful. And then, at the end of the day, there was no mention anywhere in this article about actual performance of like how this helps you with performance. So it's a bit of a weird article, but it leads into some things I learned this week that I thought I'd share with you, which is kind of interesting. So we recall that Azure and Oracle announced a partnership a while back where they basically are reselling the Oracle OCI through the Azure portal, and then they're using connectivity between Oracle OCI and Azure to service the app tier on Azure and then the database on OCI, which makes some sense to you from a licensing perspective because you get a better deal to put that in Oracle's cloud, allegedly. And that would be, you'd then get the benefit of both worlds. You get Azure's app tier, which if you're a .NET application talking to an Oracle database for some strange reason, you can now enable that. So it never made sense to us when we talked about it on the show the first time of why would Azure and Oracle partner together? And I think I've answered this question. And so if you go back in time to when RDS was first launched on Amazon.com, Oracle was, not a cloud believer. They thought cloud was a fad. They thought it was a joke. Amazon was a happy Oracle customer at the time who was, gladly paying them billions of dollars. And Amazon and Oracle partnered together to release RDS, which allowed them to buy licensing at a very large bulk discount that allowed them to then create a managed service around Oracle before any other cloud really existed or wanted to do this. And then, shortly after that, Amazon released their earnings about how much money they're making on the cloud. And I think Larry and Safra, the other co-CEO, freaked the F out about how much money they were making and realized there was an existential threat. And so they have not actually announced any partner cloud offerings for any other cloud. And so this is basically how they solved this problem, is that now Azure can't offer you RDS for the Oracle. They can't offer you an Oracle managed service, but they can resell you Oracle from Oracle. And so that's what they're doing here. This is all about Oracle being big buttheads because they realized they were leaving money on the table and basically saying, we're no longer ever going to do another RDS deal like we did with AWS. And Google and Azure, if you want to partner with us, you better do it our way or the highway. And so this is just classic Oracle being super aggressive and super negative in the market and not helping their customers do what they actually want to do, and now forces you into a path that potentially has a high risk. As I also heard that latency between Azure and Oracle Cloud is not great.
I was going to say, like, that's Oracle's solution is to, you can host your web front end or your middleware app on Azure and then somehow through the powers of the internet connect to the Oracle Cloud for your data storage. Like, that doesn't sound good.
Well, and many apps don't handle that kind of latency, right? That's the big issue here. So,
especially ones that use Oracle.
Yeah, ones that need Oracle.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing is, you put a bunch of network switches between these two things and performance does not always work so well. So it's a rough go there. So yeah, so that was interesting discovery I had this week. I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So so that's the story of why you can't get Oracle on the other cloud, but Amazon.
I mean, that's just going to drive people to open source, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Oracle is doing a great job convincing everyone to go to open source.
Yeah.
We were having this conversation at dinner the other night, and I was talking to somebody, and I was like, "Well, the truth of the matter is, Oracle's an amazing database. Like, hands down. If it wasn't for Oracle, the company, and the licensing terms of it, and I was to do a startup, I would probably build my application on Oracle. But then you look at, I'm going to get sued by Oracle within the first year because Oracle the legal team is bigger than their sales team. That's not a great strategy for a startup. And so, not a lot of companies are starting out with Oracle unless they came out of Oracle, like they were an Oracle employee who became a startup guy and used Oracle because that's what he knew. Like, that's the only time I ever hear about Oracle being really heavily used in new startups is typically if there's an Oracle founder or ex-Oracle founder in the mix. So, interesting little bit tidbit. And since they didn't tell us anything about hybrid and how multi-cloud improves your performance, which would have been actually nice, I thought I'd tell you this little tidbit I learned.
I got an answer for that of how hybrid cloud improves performance. See, they were very non-specific in the article about which customers they asked about performance improvements. Perhaps it was the Oracle Cloud customers who went multi-cloud to get better performance.
Yeah.
Just gloss over the details.
I mean, I've yet to see an all-in on Oracle announcement in favor of Peter's point, but
Thank you.
but that's not because I think they don't. I don't think any customer really wants to be all in on Oracle because you want options and ability to.
Well, I agree with all of you and your opinions in this area. However, this article pretty much has nothing to do with any of that, and I bet nobody in Oracle who has anything to do with actual products or customers read this page. This is pure SEO, SEM on their website's requirements to hit more on multi-cloud and hybrid. Like, if you read this thing, it's very clear that this is like, hey, we just need a page, send a marketing manager out to go collect a few words, and it has to be at least 185 words to qualify, and we need these 6 links to link to backlink to our other pages and say multi-cloud 5 times. Like, that's what this article
It does sort of feel like what this is about. So I completely agree with you, Peter. That's exactly what this is. It is a link bait article for sure.
Yeah.
Sounds like some kind of punishment that somebody got for not turning something in on time.
Yeah.
Write this 600 word article.
Yep.
Well, I I'm putting everyone on the spot now because I forgot to remind them this at the beginning of the show. But this is the debut of Announcement of the Week, which I don't have a sound clip for yet. We got to work on that, Jonathan. So we talked about a bunch of stories. Which of these do you think was the Announcement of the Week?
Cool.
Who wants to go first?
It's got to be the Knative. As much as I want it to be the JDBC driver, because I think that one's the more useful. I think there are large technology decisions that can be made, or at least there could be some confidence instilled in the fact that this isn't going to be somehow mungled later, or where you're going to have to pivot a lot of investment. So that's my choice.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. In fact, I'd agree not just with the choice, but with the choice of choices and the one that you picked. So yeah.
There was not a lot of great choices. I was torn between this one and Mandiant personally, so I support you guys in this.
I like to be pro all of our cloud service provider vendors because I think it's great that they're all competing and innovating. But I got to go with the cross-tenant vulnerability, auto warp, because that's one area you just can't make a mistake. You can't make a mistake with managed identity tokens. Like, it's inexcusable, and I think it really hurts the potential adoption of the cloud, giving, even though I still think cloud-based workloads are, even with these things, are still significantly more secure than homegrown, everything ground up. But these are the bullet points that people use to block their companies from going to the cloud for months or years.
But how many? Yes, but they fixed it in 4 or 5 days, and they can prove through logs that it wasn't exploited. And I think that's a huge win, because find me any other company that could fix that vulnerability and roll that change out across their entire organization in that length of time. I mean, it would be even better if Microsoft had their own internal team that had found this vulnerability themselves instead of somebody else doing it for clicks or karma or whatever Orca are doing this for PR. But I think
any security vendors doing this for the PR. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's the whole reason they have it. Yeah.
I agree with you, and it's for that reason is why I believe that even with these things happening, you're still safer running in the cloud. Just like even though there are outages, you're still more highly available in the cloud. But I just hate to see these things in the news.
I completely agree with you. I think that most companies would have a vulnerability like this, and it would be exposed forever. Right. And it's not just because they're a smaller attack vector necessarily. It's just because they don't have the ability to detect it. And so, Microsoft, AWS, they're all big targets for these security research firms. But that's also a great thing, right? That's someone constantly checking your security.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
Yeah.
That said, I don't like to see these announcements.
No, because you're right. They are weaponized. They're absolutely weaponized.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
Yeah, many times. All right, Peter, take us lightning round.
All right, let's talk about SOC reports.
Woo!
They're now available in Spanish.
¿Dónde está your local admin group report? That's not good. Sorry.
I was going no hable inglés.
Yeah.
Now generally available. Azure Chaos Studio Key Vault and Classic Cloud Services Vaults.
I keep forgetting that Chaos Studio is Gremlin type thing and not an actual studio where chaos happens. I'm so disappointed every time.
As we are about the buzzsaw in the background.
Yes, construction in the neighboring suite.
Yeah.
I thought it was too many tacos for lunch.
Oh, no. Public preview. Here's one for you. Scheduled automated emails of your saved cost views.
So all that work that you did to save cost, you want to make sure your CFO sees it. So you're scheduling the reports at a very specific time. I like it.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it's like
Between 9 and 3, 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. Probably.
no, it's 11 p.m. on a Sunday.
I really don't want to show him the data that I found out in the report, so I'm going to not email it to him.
Yeah. If over budget, then send at 1 a.m. Amazon Genomics CLI adds the SnakeMake workflow management system.
I'm pretty sure a CLI doesn't make a snake in your family, though. Like,
I can't not laugh now.
I can't take him seriously.
So when I was out for a couple of minutes earlier, I was actually paying a guy to turn the buzzer on every time Justin spoke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Money well spent. Money well spent.
Amazon Kendra adds spell checker for queries.
oh, too bad AWS always gets changed to SAW, just like my room next door.
Yeah. And you can now choose from 2 different compression options on Amazon FSx for OpenZFS.
That's right, tiny and super tiny.
Is there such a thing as too much compression? Just more compression.
That's it for the round. And too many tacos takes it, man.
Nice.
I wouldn't have if every single time Justin answered after that, there wasn't another too many tacos sound effect happening.
That with the mariachi intro, like, yeah, no, it's the full picture.
Too many
Did
tacos.
fit together nicely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to skip anything coming up this week just because I have a buzzsaw going off in the background in any minute. And so we'll skip that. But if you want to see what's coming up soon, check out the show notes and you can get all the updates on all the cool events happening very, very soon.
Or subscribe to the newsletter through the website. We put those.
Yes, you should subscribe to the newsletter if you're not already subscribed.
Yep.
All right, guys. Have another fantastic week in the cloud.
Have a good night.
See you later.
Bye, everybody.
And that is the Week in Cloud. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Foghorn Consulting. Subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and tweet us your feedback at #TheCloudPod. Or join our Slack channel, go to our website, thecloudpod.net for sign-up instructions.